Good morning. We'll call the meeting to order at Board of Equalization. Roll call, please.
Gary, Pepcorn.
Here.
Preston. Here. Strand.
Here.
Mahoney.
Here. We're going to have the assessor's year-end report. Mike Spenskowski to explain.
Thank you. Good morning. This is the Board of Equalization, and today we're going to be doing a general review of the real estate market and also a review of the assessor's office efforts. We'll also be receiving any value appeals that come forward and certify values. This meeting is done with authorization of the Century Code 571103. And at this meeting, the Commission may change the values of any property as is reasonable to render taxation uniform or consistent and equalize and correct the assessment role for fairness. This is just a general overview of the laws that govern our office. All property in the state of North Dakota is taxable unless expressly exempted by statute. The property has to be listed by February 1st of every year, so that becomes our valuation date. This law states that the value must be set at true and full value, which means that we have to try to reflect the market value each year. This also means that we can't do incremental increases or limited market adjustments, which carries its own set of problems. This says that real property is land improvements, structures, and buildings, and that includes any improvements to the lot or the land itself. And this states that the two criteria for sending a notice of increase are $3,000 and 10%. So we have to send a notice if those two criteria are met. And this also means that there are some properties that could receive an increase that don't get a notice if it doesn't meet those two standards. So you could have some properties receiving an increase that's a little bit smaller, and they would not necessarily receive an increase that their value went up. The law requires that we set the values at true and full value. However, because the market is imperfect and unpredictable, the state allows our sales ratio to be between 90 and 100%. If our sales ratio does not come into compliance, the state can come in and make an increase or decrease to bring the values into compliance. This is usually done by classification, so they may say that all commercial gets a 20% increase or all residential gets a 10% decrease. This is why the local assessor is so important, because we can analyze and target the data and the problem areas and adjust them with more accuracy. I'll do a quick review of the sales ratio process. At the time of sale, the assessed value, or true and full value, is divided by the sale price to get the sales ratio. Then we find the middle ratio and to see if we are in compliance. If the data, in this data example, this would be 86%, so we're out of compliance for the state. Once we see this, we go through our local efforts and make adjustments to the values so that they're closer to the market. And the result is that we bring the values into compliance with the state, in this case with a 93% median ratio. So here's the ratios before and after for our local adjustments for this last year. Commercial was in compliance, but the residential values were low compared to the market. So we had to adjust a lot of properties to keep up with the strong real estate market. Besides the state requirements, we also adhere to professional standards put forth by our International Association for Assessment Accuracy and Equitability. The three main measures of this are the coefficient of dispersion, or the COD, the price-related differential, or the PRD, and the price-related bias, or the PRB. The coefficient of dispersion measures how closely the sales ratio is gathered around the median, and is an indication of the uniformity or the consistency of the assessment relative to the market. So if we are in that 5 to 15 range, then we are doing a good job of being consistent with our assessment relative to the market. This year's value adjustments brought Fargo's COD to 7.5 for residential and 13 for commercial. The price-related differential and the price-related bias both have to do with vertical equity or the level of equality in the assessment or fairness of the low and high value properties. Assessments are considered either regressive or progressive. A regressive assessment means that the high value properties are under-assessed relative to low value properties, and a progressive assessment means that the high value properties are over-assessed relative to low value properties. Again, we want our measures to be within these professional standards. Fargo's numbers shown above are well within the professional standards, showing an acceptable range of horizontal and vertical equity. We also adhere to the 5-year plan of reviewing properties for information accuracy that's put forward by the International Association. Here's the map of the 5-year reappraisal plan that we have for the city of Fargo. We just finished reappraising Area 3, and we will be going into Area 4 this summer. Also of note is that we have this split up by certain streets and avenues, and it's done for the size of the parcel load for each area. We will be adjusting this here later this year because one of the areas is Area 3 especially was one of our larger areas for the amount of parcels in that one. So we'll be adjusting this map to be a little bit easier to get to all the parcels in each area this year. Now I'll just highlight some of the details of the market over the last year. Some of the challenges is that we have a strong real estate market. Interest rates have increased but are still pretty low, so we're going to have to see if that starts to make a change as far as the rapidity of transactions that are going down and also how much people are paying for their houses. Also, a question from last year is what is the effect of COVID-19 at this point? We've had record sales for the last 2 years, so we can't say that we've seen strong effects due to the COVID-19. We're going to keep on looking. There have been stories about foreclosures increasing in certain areas of the country. We haven't seen it here yet. Wasn't able to gather a lot of data. The small amount of data that I was able to gather on foreclosures in the area still suggests that we're still pretty low. So we will be watching that over the next year. So going into the real estate market itself, we had a record amount of commercial sales, 189 for the last year. That's 36% more than 2020. And on the residential side, we've had 2 years of residential record sales, 12.5% this year over 2020, which again, 2020 was a record year itself as well. So very strong market. This slide shows the median sale price of a single-family home for 2021 at $300,000. That's an 11% increase up over last year, which was $270,000. Sorry, not last year, 2020. The thing to remember with all of these is that I'm looking at 2021. So even though we're in April right now, we're looking at the sales for from January to December of 2021. This is not the strongest increase we've had. It's a strong increase, but we actually had a 14% increase back between 14 and 15, and a 13% increase between 94 and 95. The goal of this graph is to show a measure of the Fargo housing market in relation to other markets nationally. The orange line is the same line that you just saw on the last slide showing the median home price. This is not a comparison of Fargo's home price to its other cities shown. The data for the other cities just shows the ups and downs of their home prices based on this index. This shows that while some of these other cities have had some very high home prices followed by a large drop, Fargo's market has much more gradual increases and decreases, and the overall trend is upward. This means that overall we have a pretty stable market. These are the efforts of the assessor's office over the last year. Of note, we adjusted property values on 20,700 properties and sent out over 14,300 notices of increase. Also of note here is that we sent out 6,300 requests for review as part of the reappraisal effort, and we're granted just 1,900 properties let us in to take a look and physically review the information. That means that we gained access to about 22% of the properties that we attempted to review this year. All of these efforts resulted in an overall value of 18.7 billion, and an overall increase of about 8% for the total city values. Commercial went up just about 7.5%, and residential 9.5%. And again, that has to do with our ratios, commercial being in compliance and the residential being out of compliance. This pie graph shows the same numbers from the last slide. The difference of note here is that the difference between the commercial and the residential is a little bit closer. They're both, right around that 40% mark, and in the past, the residential has been a little bit less. So they're getting a little closer to equal this year. So the 2022 taxable value is projected at $714 million, almost 715. 3.5% of that is new growth, and 4.7% of that is existing market increases, and 1 mil is worth just about $715 million. This year's taxable value is predicted to be 8.3% higher than last year. A historical look over the last 42 years shows that the taxable amount increased an average of 5.8% per year. And this shows the taxable change over the last few years. Again, we're in that 715 million range. It's also interesting to see how long it took for the taxable value to go up $200 million. You've seen this one before, but it's just an interesting look again. The first time we reached $200 million was 2003. It took 11 years to get another 200 million, up to 400 million of taxable value again in 2014. And 5 years after that, in 2019, we reached $600 million. This shows the total taxable value by school district for 2021, according to Cass County. You can see that the school district 1 accounts for about 68% of Fargo's taxable value, and school district 6 about 32%. And that portion of Fargo accounts for 47% of school district 6's taxable value. This slide shows the breakdown of discretionary exemptions for 2021 according to Cass County. This shows the breakdown for this year for the discretionary exemptions and the value changes. The discretionary exemptions are exemptions that are controlled by the City Commission. Of note here is the Renaissance value almost doubling again as a result of construction and more projects being completed in the downtown area. Also of note here is the residential new construction exemption. We have about 658 parcels in that exemption itself for a total true and full value of $280 million, with 97 million of that being exempt through this exemption, and that's about 35% of the value. The non-discretionary exemptions are the exemptions that are in place by state law that the Commission does not have any control over. I'm a little too fast through that if you want me to back up. These are the TIFs that are shown for this year. current TIFs in place. The Great Northern was paid off this year, and the Brouhaha was added. Excuse me. The taxes generated by the increment this year is estimated to be about $6,600 less than last year. So at $1,248,000. Last year it was in $1,254,000. Also of note here is that the taxable value of the total TIF right now makes up about 0.63 of the total taxable base. Last year it was 0.68 of the total taxable base. So just to let people know that there's some legislative tax relief out there, the Homestead program provides a reduction in taxable value for qualifying homeowners. We have the requirements: they must be over 65 years of age, they must not exceed the income of $42,000, and have total assets under $500,000, including the homestead or the property that they're applying for. This can give up to $5,625 credit in taxable value. And the example shows down here that if you had a house valued at $195,000, the estimated tax would be almost $2,600 with the credit. In this case, they could get their taxes down to $1,265. And this is this credit is calculated from an 80% credit. Another one that's very similar is the Disabled Veterans Credit. This works very similar to the Homestead Credit itself. The applicant must have all of the requirements met, and there's no income or asset restrictions on this one. This one also changed from last year. The maximum credit was $6,750, and the law changed it last year up to $8,100. So they can get a more of a credit this year than they got last year. This one also can be coupled with the homestead credit, so they could get the disabled veterans credit and the homestead credit put together for their tax relief on this one. And again, showing that their estimated taxes could go from $2,600 down to $200 if they apply and are eligible. Then we have the homestead credit for special assessments. This provides reduction in special assessments for qualifying homeowners. The applicants must qualify for the homestead credit, and they have to submit an application annually to the county. They can get a maximum credit of $6,000. It does create a lien on their property that must be paid off at the time of transfer. And then the City of Fargo Special Assistance Program is also available. It provides a reduction in annual special assessments for qualifying homeowners. It's paid out of city local funds as available, and it's administered by the City Planning Department. The requirements are that the applicant must be income eligible, and they must also own and occupy the residence. They have to make an annual application to the city, and the original amount of specials balance must exceed $500. It's for replacement or upgrading of infrastructure in existing neighborhoods, so it's not for the new developments. And they can get a credit of from 50 up to 100% of their annual amount due. So we've got about 150 families yearly that receive assistance through this. And in the example, if you have a household of 4, and they are making under that or $53,640 household income, they can get a 50%. If their income is below that, the credit assistance can go up again to 100%. So making their specials payment for the year drop itself. And for anybody that does not receive a valuation notice, our current information is on fargoparcels.com. Most of the information we have on people's property is out there, so they can take a look at it. And before we go into the appeals process, I'd like to go over what the process looks like. When we receive an appeal, an appraiser will first verify that the data on the property itself is accurate, then we'll analyze the market and compare it to properties around it, similar properties, to make sure that it's being treated fairly. Finally, we'll make a determination either whether the value is insupportable and we need to make an adjustment, or it's supportable based off of the data that we have, and we will not make an adjustment. If after this process the owner does not agree with us, then they have the option of going to the county or to the state boards. At this point, just to give you an update, we've received about 194 appeals this year, which is not out of line from years in the past. We have about 50 right now that are unresolved. Of that number, we have reduced about 50% of the people that called in to us. We reduced their value. At this point, I'll accept any questions the board has for me.
Any questions, Commissioner Pepcorn?
So Mike, I have a question. We met earlier and you talked about you review to make sure that the high value properties are paying the similar rate as the low value properties. It's kind of complicated. So could you just kind of quickly summarize that? Because I wasn't aware of that. I think it's a great thing to do. Can you just talk a little bit about that process? Thank you.
Sure. So what we're trying to do is make sure that if you have a property that is valued at $800,000, that it is being assessed at $800,000, and that the property that's being assessed at that has a value of $200,000 is being valued at $200,000. And if we had a case where the $800,000 house was being valued at, say, $700,000, and the $200,000 house was being valued at $250,000, then that would be an inequity. It would be an unfairness in the way that they're being treated for tax purposes. And so those measures that I showed in the beginning, where we're looking at that vertical equity and that horizontal equity, those are the measures that address that type of situation and tell us if we have a regressive type of assessment where we are treating those high values people differently or unfairly compared to the low values. Those are the things that we try to measure and correct in our assessment.
Commissioner Preston?
Yeah, you and I had that same conversation, and I had passed a study on to you that showed that ours might be a little bit regressive. You also talked about, we pulled some of those numbers apart a little bit. You talked about, I think, a fourth measurement tool. Is that, or is it one of the three that you presented that you don't have the benchmark to go by?
Right. The fourth one that was presented, it's brand new. It's just been out a few months, and so we don't. The national standards haven't been set for it yet. But we want to be aware of these things as they come out. Just another tool to make sure that the assessment job we're doing is accurate and as fair as possible. But again, those standards haven't been set by the national organization, so it's something that we're going to be looking at, and we're looking for standards to come out at some point so that we can use them again to make sure to do the quality assurance on our assessment itself. But at this point, we can't. It's interesting information, but it's not usable at this point. So,
Couple more
Mr.
questions,
Preston.
if I could. So do you have numbers on the tax relief and the assistance programs, both in the number of applicants and in the dollar amount?
so you're talking about the homestead credits and things along these lines,
And the
right?
veterans credit and the special assessments and all of that? And
Yep, and I did skip over that one a little bit quickly, so.
Or are these the actual, oh no, these are just examples as far as I can tell.
Yeah, so as far as the homestead credits, we do have around 581 people who are receiving the homestead credit this year, and 546 people are receiving the veterans credit.
Okay.
And then as far as any of the ones up there in front of you, let me see if I have those.
Do you have the assessment assistance one?
150.
Through the city of Fargo?
Yeah.
That about 150 planning told me families a year receive that.
And then one more question, if I could. If you could go back to that graphic that showed the increase in 200 million valuation over time. Yeah, not that one.
One more right there.
There you go.
Okay.
So those jumps, especially, the last one, it seems, well, the last two actually seem like they're probably the steepest. Does that relate to you had indicated the 4% was related to growth and 3% related to existing or something like that? Is that a breakdown for these increases that you're seeing here?
Right. So taxable value itself actually has to do more so with the inflationary or the market increases that you have, and any properties that are coming out of exemption. Say if you had a pilot or something along those lines going off, a large project going off, that would become taxable. So taxable dollars itself means anything that's taxable as of this year. So some of it would be new value. If you had houses like, say, along the lines with the residential, you would have a new house going on, and if they got the exemption itself, well, they would get the $150,000 off, but everything else would be taxable itself. So, anything that, when it comes to the taxable value itself, is going to be a part of this, that's going to make this equation go up. So anything as far as market increases on existing properties themselves that don't have an exemption, that's going to jack up that taxable value. And anything new that also doesn't have an exemption that's coming on new is going to make
This basically
the
affects
taxable
the
value.
growth of the city as we continue to grow. And as you accelerate, it's just we're growing faster and faster, doubled our population in 10 years. We're also having fantastic commercial, residential growth within the city, coupled with inflation as well. Right.
That's what I'm trying to get a sense of. How much of this, would it be 50-50, where 50% of it is new growth and 50% is increase in existing valuation?
Well, so on the slide here, just before this, right here,
Right.
this, 3.5% of it was new growth, and 4.7 of it is existing.
Okay.
Yep.
Commissioner Strand, did you have a question?
I don't.
Okay. Any other questions? We open it for public right now, Mike?
Yep.
Is there anyone in the public who would like to appeal their valuation? Is there anyone in public who wants to appeal? Seeing that the area is empty of people, I assume they have contacted your office and they will be able to do that.
Yep.
Commissioner Strand.
Thank you, Mayor. Would you introduce your team to us and tell us about your department? I think it's good to know how many, who they are and what,
Yes.
if you could, Mike.
Yes, please stand. So this is all of, except for, we have the two office associates are up in the office still, but these are all of my appraisers. We have anywhere from 30 years down to just a few months of experience here. We have 3 commercial appraisers and the rest are residential appraisers, 8 of them. And they do an excellent job of reaching out to people and trying to get to the information and being as respectful and helpful as we can. As you know, the assessor's office is not anybody's favorite department, but we do try to do a good job of giving excellent customer service and helping people as much as we can, trying to treat them as equitably and fairly and respectfully as we can.
John, do you want us to give them a round of applause for their hard work?
I wouldn't mind it. Mayor, frankly, I'm not so sure sometimes that our inspecting department and our assessors shouldn't have body cams. And I'm not joking about that. I'm guessing some of the circumstances you face are not fun, so maybe when we have hand-me-down body cams, we can take it to the next highest level of risk.
So we're going to come back into session in 2 weeks?
Yeah, so it'd be, if you want to schedule it either for April 26th or May 3rd, that would be good.
What's the pleasure of the commission?
Do it reconvene.
Mr. Chair, can I just add really quickly, this is so impressive. We have nobody here in person. When you look at all the city and all the assessments and all the chatter that we hear, anyway, so and I agree with John, they are our front door with a lot of disgruntled taxpayers. So thank you for what you go through on our behalf. And the big thing is you're so professional. And so thank you for the whole group for your work. And the whole thing about you are appreciated. And it is a very important job. And like you said, you may not get all the positive feedback, but you do a very important service. And I think this whole message about making sure that everyone's treated fairly, that's a big deal. And so thank you for doing that. I think I was not aware of that, and I think that's very important. So thank you for all you do. I know we gave you a round of applause, but I do think you go through a lot on our behalf. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Mayor, May 3rd would work for me. The other date wouldn't, but it doesn't matter.
May 3rd?
If it's
That'd be fine. So we will anticipate coming back on May 3rd at 7:30 in the morning again. Mike, is that fair?
Yep.
I just want to say one of the things I really liked is that you had 3 different parameters that we checked with our accuracy. And the people in the city of Fargo can be assured that we are within those norms, and we do an excellent job, whether you're high or low, of getting it right. And that's what's most important for the people in the community. So with that being done, do I have a motion to adjourn?
That's a move.
Is there a second?
second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
We're adjourned.